We hadn't planned on telling you about the Shadows, whose music we're going to try to play as best as we can for you tonight, because we assumed that most of the audience tonight would be more or less my age, and therefore would have grown up with the music of the Shadows and didn't need to be introduced to them. However, we looked at the crowd that actually came tonight, looked at each one of you very, very carefully, and couldn't find a single person over 40. Accordingly, my colleagues in the band asked me to tell you a few things about that 1960s English band, The Shadows. The music of The Shadows is very different from that of what is known as retro today. In fact, very different from the bands that came before or shortly after them. The basic difference, I suppose, is that The Shadows were a purely instrumental group with no vocals.
So don't expect us to break into song, okay? No singers here.
Thank you, Lenny. The lineup of The Shadows was a standard one for the time, with lead guitar, rhythm, but which, in contrast with the other bands at the time, they played on an acoustic, usually a Gibson.
That's why I'm using this. This is a Gibson acoustic guitar.
Lenny is very proud of her Gibson, which is an exact replica of what The Shadows used. Now, they also had, of course, in addition to those two guitars, an electric bass, drums, and later on they added a keyboard. But with that simple lineup, in a very short period of time during which The Shadows were popular, a 3-year period from 1960 to 1963, The Shadows created a special sound, unique to them, that would manage to etch itself into the brains of teenagers and kids looking for music to identify with in the very early 1960s. Baby boomers, like me, perhaps some of you. We're going to play just 6 more Shadows songs or pieces in addition to the one that we played, because it's a scientifically proven fact that that's the maximum number of Shadows pieces that a non-Shadows audience can listen to politely. Now, for the sake of the non-Shadows fans there, please let me take a moment just to tell you about the next piece we're going to play, after which we'll run through our short repertoire. And coincidentally, to tell you why we have a Chinese drum on the stage with us tonight. The next piece we're going to play was the first ever hit of The Shadows. It stayed on the charts in London for 20 weeks, a record, and stayed #1 for 5 of those weeks. It was a product of many cultural influences. It was written by an Englishman, Jerry Lorden, who was living in London, but who was inspired by a Hollywood film about an American Indian whose role in the film was played by a white American. Does anybody remember who that white American actor is?
Wow!
Burt Lancaster. Is there somebody here over 40? Right, it was Burt Lancaster, and the name of the movie and The Shadows piece is, of course, Apache. That's right. Now, when The Shadows were recording Apache in 1960 at Abbey Road Studios in London, they needed an Indian tom-tom for the piece. But they couldn't find one at Abbey Road Studios. Instead, underneath one of the staircases in the studio, they found a Chinese tam-tam, a Chinese drum, like this one. In those days of 2-track recording, all the music had to be recorded all at one time. And because the drummer stayed with his drums, they needed to find somebody to play the Chinese tom-tom for the recording of Apache. Some trivia. Who was that person that they enlisted to play the Chinese tam-tam? Nobody? Tell him, Lenny.
Oh, no less than Cliff Richard.
That's right. It was Cliff Richard that played the Chinese tam-tam in Apache. And he played it more or less like this.